Yeah. So thank you for joining us for the Performing Arts panel. We're very excited today to have 4 panelists from very interesting backgrounds to share with us their experiences. So to get started, we'll lead with Jody. You are first on my panel.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. My name's Jody Beck. I'm currently in New York. I'm a producer, actor, singer, kind of do everything. I'm currently working on a project that I just got funded to shoot in Costa Rica. So we're going to be cameras up in December, which is exciting. And I'm excited to hear what questions people have about my journey and the way I got here, how I moved from a small town in Ohio and came to New York, and even through 3 crazy times, September 11th, the 2008 crash, and now coronavirus, that, as artists, we find ways to make our way through. So it's kind of exciting to talk to students who, maybe looking at the world and wondering how they fit into it. So I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, Jody. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
And up next, we'll have Ian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ian. I am from Berlin, Germany. Moved to the States in 2006, actually, for college. I'm an actor, and I currently serve as executive director of City Center Dance. It is a dance school located in White Plains, which is where I'm zooming in from right now, White Plains, New York. My wife is a dancer, and as I said, I have the acting background, and we purchased this business something like 4 years ago, just in time to have our butts kicked by COVID, just as we were getting into the swing of things. But when I'm not yelling at little kids as the executive director here, I'm also an actor in the city. I'm an associate director with New York Classical Theater. And I tour the country when it's not COVID with Jim West puppets, actually. So focusing mainly on children's theater when I'm not doing the classical thing that puts everyone to sleep in a dark theater. Very, very privileged to be here, and very much looking forward to questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ian. Next, we'll have Joe.
Hello. My name is Joe. I am physically in New York, but I am working remotely from Playhouse Square in Cleveland, Ohio, which is the downtown theater district. Yes, in Cleveland. It's actually the largest theater district outside of New York in the country. And behind me is the North America's largest outdoor chandelier. It's one of our selling points. But I do marketing for group sales at Playhouse Square. And so basically I'm responsible for marketing campaigns that have anything to do with kind of the group sales arm, mostly for our touring Broadway series, because we've got when shows travel from Broadway all over the country, they stop at different cities. And so they're here for usually 2 or 3 weeks, and we've got to get groups in there. So it's kind of what I do. A little bit about my background. The last 10 years I spent roaming the country. I've worked in Denver, Detroit, Cleveland, and now in New York, but still kind of Cleveland. And I actually have a sports management background. I just kind of found my way into performing arts, but I love it, and I'm looking forward to all your questions.
Thanks, Joe. And then our final panelist, Avid.
Hello, everybody. I'm Avid Williams.
Avid.
No worries. It's okay. There's an academic program called AVID, so I get that too. I'm Avid Williams. I'm an opera singer, music educator. I've also been an artist manager. I've also traveled to Berlin. I used to live in Berlin, so I speak a couple of languages. And so I've had a varied background because like I said, I'm a graduate of Harlem Boys Choir, which is a world famous organization. Unfortunately, not active now, but as a child, I grew up in the arts. And so I grew up in the arts through the lens of being in an urban community, not knowing what does the world behold, and have sung for Nelson Mandela and Jesse Jackson and a whole lot of people. I'm a graduate of CUNY, City University of New York, where I did 3 masters. and Mittelstufe 1 at the Goethe Institute in Berlin. So I'm grateful to be here to answer any questions regarding, what we think is a quote unquote B plan is my A plan now. I absolutely love teaching. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's see, let's go back to Jody. What got you into the performing arts industry?
Well, ever since I was a child, I was a dancer. Started out as a dancer and then took tap lessons and jazz and ballet and all that from being a young child. And in my high school years, I was doing musicals with my high school and realized for the first time when my competition choir went to Toronto to compete that people actually did this as a career. So I had no idea. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's exactly what I want to do. So I went to Kent State University. I graduated with a BFA in acting and a dance minor. And then I moved to New York City on September 1st, 2001. So I have really good timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that you've had this passion since a child and seeing that. I think that's so interesting for our students to hear of the way that you can pursue that path. Thank you. And then let's see, Ian, what about you? What got you started in this industry?
Similarly, as a child, honestly, I was shy as a toddler and whatnot, and then developed a real hankering for people's attention. And there was actually, it was, without diving into too much detail, it was a Martin Luther King Day presentation that we did at our elementary school in 5th grade. And I was tasked with, running a Q&A for Martin Luther King Day. Really, looking back, it's like I'm really not well qualified for that for obvious reasons, but it was a wonderful opportunity. And then our choir director was like, you need to be in the musical. And then one thing just led to the next. I auditioned for the musical, and then I was in every possible show I could get my hands on. And thanks to this choir director also, he got me involved in the Berlin State, the German State Opera, and other professional theaters at a young age that needed English-speaking children who didn't have stage fright in Germany. So being at the right place at the right time and striking while the iron is hot. And then I went to college. Like, that's when I came to the States for college. I went to North Carolina School of the Arts, and then moved here to New York to do that whole actor life. What would remind me just now, Jody, you said something. I was like, oh, I had this experience early on when I was like, oh, people can actually like do this and get paid for that. I remember watching Jim Carrey in The Mask and Ace Ventura. I was like, man, I would love to get paid to just do ridiculous things. That's so cool. And during one of the puppet shows that I was touring a couple of years back, one of the parts of that show was, let's stop the show, let's turn all the house lights up and introduce the kids to all the people in the theater that you don't usually get to hear about, like the lighting designer and the sound designer and all these. So it was a really nice part of the show that I even as a performer was like, I take these people for granted all the time. They make me look like $1 million. So it was a great moment to tell the little kids, like, you know what, you can absolutely be a lawyer or a dentist or a doctor. That's awesome. And then there's this guy who can talk into this like little stick, and his voice comes out of the ceiling. Or there's this woman who pushes a couple buttons and does a disco show. Like, these are all jobs we don't regularly hear about from an early age on. So like, how can kids? That's when it got me fascinated. How can kids know what they want when they're not being told what is all out there? So just want to bounce off of what Jody said. That was even late in my career as an actor. I was like, that's something I never thought about. And I, rub shoulders with these people all the time.
Right. Thank you. Yes, I think when we think about the performing arts industry, a lot of times people think of those front facing, right? So like acting, singing, dancing. But if that's not necessarily your talent, there are other ways for students who are interested in this field to still maintain a foot in that world. Can I follow up, Ian, on that? And then do you have any specific maybe experiences of like how you actually, because in your bio you've been involved with some of that as well, right? How did you get involved with some of the other aspects of performing arts?
Okay, so that actually kind of was the beauty of moving to New York. And I can only speak from a New York perspective. I'm sure this happens in Chicago and Cleveland and LA, but it's like the connections that you form by being your best self and just literally trying to get by. Everything that I was doing seemed like an opportunity, whether it was catering or I never waited tables as such in a restaurant, but I did the catering thing, and then like you just meet so many people. So my big thing was like, I kept getting opportunities in the most unlikely ways because especially a place like New York, big cities, you're constantly meeting new people and just asking questions. Just ask questions. I worked enough cocktail parties in my life to realize, oh, that's the formula. Just ask people questions and then they walk away thinking, oh, I love that guy. We had a great conversation. They did all the talking. But then when something happens to come up, they're like, oh, wait, he mentioned that he was an actor and he kind of likes physical theater. Oh, you know what? My previous mentor needs a new assistant doing puppets. Or he mentioned that he did like, children's education. Like there's this tour going on. So it was in the most unlikely fashions. Like I have a lot of friends that were so good at auditioning and just hit the pavement. And I have to be very honest, I was awful at that end of the business. I hated it. So having not done it well, I have a lot of advice on what I would tell my younger self to do. So that's one way to do it. But the other way to do it is like use every opportunity that you're leaving the house. It's not about like, oh, I'm gonna go out and make connections, but it's literally, I just want to meet people and ask questions. And the next thing you know, these little connections that you've made in a genuine, sincere manner, just trying to make new friends, that starts to just over time add up as you're putting that energy into it. So short of anything else than that, I'd say dumb luck. Yeah, that was my experience.
Thank you. That's great advice. Similar to a lot of the advice that we give students just in general, career advice too. So thank you. Let's see. So Joe, I know you're a little bit, you started off, right, not necessarily interested in the performing arts. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this industry.
Yeah, and you know what? I can really relate to what Ian was saying because I was a kid in New York City. I would grow up, I would go see plays, and I loved it, but I didn't really see it as a career path, and I really didn't have those opportunities to, those programs that could really guide you into that kind of that way to go. And so I ended up, I went to college for public relations, so I kind of just general like marketing, public relations stuff. And then when I got my master's degree, I got into sports management because I'm also a huge sports fan, wanted to just see that industry as well. And just so happened that when I was working in Cleveland, I was working for the Cleveland Cavs. I was on their promotional team doing some marketing for them, and that was part-time. And then in Cleveland, where the Cavs arena is, it's like a quarter mile. It's walking distance from where this theater district is. So at the same time, I got another part-time job doing ticket sales for Playhouse Square. And I would literally just had my foot in both doors waiting to see which one kind of opened up. And and so much, again, what Ian was saying was so right, just the network you make just in that kind of local theater community. Because at that time, I also just, I was 30 at the time. I had never been on an audition in my life. And like, I had just auditioned for like my first community theater role. And I got the part in the first audition I ever went to. I mean, it's not, nothing professional, but for someone that's never kind of put themselves out there like that before, that was huge for me. And then it turns out all these people in this community theater like circle also worked here, and it's like it's all interconnected. And so basically I did ticket sales there for a year and a half, and then just kept applying for whatever full-time jobs opened. I think in a year and a half I applied for 4 different jobs. Out of the 4, I got called back for 2 interviews for the full-time ones, and then eventually got hired in the position where I am now. And that's kind of just how I got my start, just kind of feeling my way through it.
Thank you. Thanks. And then, all right. David, did I get it right? I'm so sorry about. So
You're fine. You're perfect. You're fine. Just think of David without the
yes.
D and think of diva backwards.
Oh, okay, perfect. So tell us how you got into the industry.
So I love that question, honestly. So again, I'm a graduate of the Harlem Boys Choir. So as my grandmother would say, who's transitioned, you know, she saw me at 3 years old singing in the broomstick in the bathroom, you know. And so I sang in church. That was the place for me. And so from there, you know, went through high school, college as a vocal performance major, my undergrad. And then, true story, my choral conductor grandmother passed away. And so she said, listen, I need you to cover the class. And, you know, there'll be a faculty member in the back, but I need you to teach. I'm like, I'm an opera singer, you know, I'm not a teacher. I'm an opera, hello? So, and then I was conducting, and then I was like, this is interesting. Okay, wow, okay, so if you do this, oh, that song comes out. And then before you know it, I just kind of rolled into being a teacher. I love the artistic creation behind it, particularly children and students, and even adults who may not see what I can see and feel and hear. And so, yeah, that's how I got into my track, if you will.
I have to ask, what do you like more, teaching or performing?
Well, I can tell you, people that know me and love me, I think love me performing, but appreciate me teaching. Right? So I think everyone knows the song in my heart. And so that's a whole nother Zoom and another panel. But I love teaching. You know, I think for me personally, and this goes out to students and anyone, I'm sure every panelist can relate to. It's so interesting when you try not to leverage your talent with reality. And again, that's a whole nother Zoom, so I'll stay focused, I promise. I'll stay focused on the objective here. And so for me, I'm glad that I found another space where I can operate and still be authentically true to myself.
That's
I think, yeah. I mean, the last thing I would say is I think we all can relate, as everyone said, you know, thriving through these catastrophic events going on in the world and be an artist with the responsibility / job of taking the audience out of their reality can sometimes be tough, you know. And so like you have COVID, I have so many colleagues who are, you know, unfortunately dealing with life, you know. And so you know, that, as you say, get into the business, what, if I may segue into this last point, there's no such thing as an ability not used, right? So, you know, we talk about majors and minors and this, you know, and so students, please be mindful of any ability has its purpose. And, you know, honestly, I mean, I'm not saying every singer needs to be a plumber, but the reality is, listen, we need plumbers, we need technical, you know, I mean, Ian, these are, you know, Joe, they have theaters where they can't do anything but hope the contract is in their name and hope, okay, is there a clause in there that says discount with big smiles? You know, these are real things. Okay, I'm gonna go on mute.
No, thank you for sharing. That's actually a really good segue into one of our questions, which is related to COVID and some of the challenges that maybe you've noticed in the field, and even some advice that you might have for students that are interested in pursuing this. Jody, you mentioned that this had directly affected you, right? Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
I had actually been working on a musical for the last 6 years as a director and lead producer. It's called Dear Prospective Students, and we were supposed to open off-Broadway May 2021. Again, real good with the timing. But so of course the show's been postponed indefinitely. We have a tentative date of May 2023, but it's also, we're not sure if the show itself will be pertinent at that point. So there were a lot of moments throughout this entire pandemic that were very emotional and very difficult, because musicals specifically usually take 6 to 8 years in development. So you're spending a lot of time getting to know people and getting the show out there so that people can see it and get interested in it and workshopping it. And because it's such a collaborative medium, you've got dance, music, acting, you have so many moving parts that it just takes a really long time to put those things together. So it was difficult because I had put all that energy and time into it, but part of what everyone on this panel has been talking about, and I think is so important for people to realize as you move forward in any kind of endeavor, is the more you are doing, the more relationships you have and that you've built throughout your life, the easier it is for you to pivot when something like that happens. So had I only had all my eggs in that one basket, it would have been far more devastating than it was. But I am an actor, I am a producer. I had just started my production company and had been developing short films. And my partner and I decided that we were going to figure out a way to do a short film during COVID, like in the middle of it all. And we got it financed, again, exactly what Ian was saying. The relationships that you make throughout your life are the people that are going to support you. They're going to be your tribe, and it's super important that you keep them by you. Because I made some phone calls and I said, look, I was supposed to be doing this, getting ready for my directorial debut, off-Broadway debut, and that's not happening, but I have another thing that I want to do. And people really like that. They like that energy. They like the idea that you have things happening. And especially during COVID, they want to support people. So I leaned on them and got a short film produced and finalized a short film based on the musical. So 2 projects throughout COVID that ended up happening, which I had no idea about ahead of time. So, and the nice thing about film too is it's fast. It's like you come up with an idea, you get the money, and you go. It's not like musicals where it's like, oh my God, I just spent 7 years of my life for something that just blew up in my face. So it's just really important to keep your focus on the fact that you want to be creating, and not necessarily keep your focus on one particular aspect or one thing, because you never know. You just never know.
Thank you, Jody. I'm glad that you were able to find another way to make that work for you, at least in the meantime. I look forward to seeing what comes of it. From, you said 2023?
2023, we have an off-Broadway debut, so we'll see if that works.
Okay, fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ian, you had mentioned some COVID-related things as well, right?
Yeah, so in various parts of my life, so as, let's say, executive director hat on, dealing with parents, because we cater to children 18 months to 18 years. So parents last year were, sending kids. I got to, manage the budgets and blah, blah, blah. But that's all very boring. I think the toughest part in that world of mine was managing expectations and concerns within a certain political spectrum, within a certain political atmosphere, right? There was a lot going on last year beyond COVID, or layered on top of COVID. So managing a facility that has a lot of traffic, less so last year than previous years and then now, thank God. But still managing all of that and managing people's expectations when everyone is on high alert. Again, for so many different reasons. Everyone's anxiety is through the roof, and you have to be, I mean, the only thing that sets us apart, honestly, is customer service. again, that's just for the dance studio businessy aspect. That's my world there. I would say the other difficulty, which only really came to surface when we actually got to do our recital this last May. The previous year's recital, so recital 2020 was canceled. No live theater, all that. But then 2021, we were able to actually hold a show in a theater at Tarrytown Music Hall. Gorgeous landmark theater, lots of history to it. And it only dawned on me after 2 years of not actually being in a theater and working on a show that like how much I had suffered as an artist through that, fallow period. That, we have self-imposed fallow periods as artists where I just need to like refuel my energy. This was not self-imposed. This was externally imposed. And it took me that long when we stepped into the theater with all the kids arriving, and you literally, it has a smell to it. The old seats, the lights, when they get turned on, the heat that comes off of them, there's the smell that over the years you just get, it feels like home. So I realized in that moment when we were going into recital weekend, starting dress rehearsals, I was like, oh my God, that's why I felt this whole time since the shutdown started, like I've been wearing someone else's skin and just kind of like pretending as best as I could and just crawling my way through every single day to just get to the end of it and have a glass of wine and just, chalk one off as another loss. Then it suddenly made sense. It's like, oh, because that's where I belong. And again, that's just my experience as a performer. I realized in that moment how much of a privilege it is to be a performer. It's a noble art, and how much of a privilege it is to actually get to exercise that passion, that obsession. And I guess I had taken it a bit for granted because things had just kind of, for better or for worse, fallen in my lap until then. I did the work. I always did the homework, worked hard, but still, when it is torn away from you, it's a traumatic experience. And I just kind of like put my head down to get through it. So it was interesting to walk into the theater again after so long of being away and realize, wow, this is my calling. And until then, because I started off as a kid, it was just like, well, this is just what I do, right? Like, because I'm good at it and people cheer and they think I'm funny and yay. And I get to bow at the end, which is fun. But then it turned from that to really feeling in the depths of my heart and the deepest parts of my bone marrow, oh, I literally cannot function properly without this. I need to kind of change up my matrix again. So having said all that, now as an executive director here, I'm like, wow, we took over a business, learning the ropes, great. I'm at a place now as an artist where I need to feed that part of me again. I put that on hold for a little while we were getting that whole thing done, because I didn't go to business school. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to fake it till I make it. And so last year, coming back to the theater was like, this would be a good move to do for myself. It's like, no, I'm going to jump off a bridge if I don't do this again. And coming from that place of necessity really fuels a fire that has been dormant for a little too long.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing that. Joe, Ava, do you have anything that you might want to add about how this past year has affected the way that you work?
Yeah, definitely. Like from a marketing perspective, I was really lucky that Playhouse Square values that creative aspect of my job, because with thousands of canceled shows and millions of lost dollars, I could have been furloughed the entire time and just not doing anything. But instead, I was kind of put in a position where I could use that creativity to kind of break out of the things we normally do, because now we don't have tickets to sell, we're not marketing shows, we just want to engage with our audience members, and like, what's the best way to do that? How can we keep them interested throughout this time so that when we do come back, people are ready and people feel like they've been connected this whole time. So two of the biggest Broadway shows that got canceled that were supposed to come to Cleveland last year were Frozen was going to make its first trip to Cleveland, and then Hamilton was going to make its second trip. And so what we did was, over last summer, we had a Frozen week and a Hamilton week where we just created content for both of those shows. And it could seem silly, like and it ranged for audience levels. For like younger kids, for Frozen, we just like did crafts where you could make snow dough in your bathtub with conditioner and something. And so we kind of, just kind of ran with that, different craft activities. Or for Hamilton, like I'm such a big Hamilton nerd that we did such a deep dive into it. It was like, I wrote this, I want to say we wrote it, but literally it's like a reference guide for every single reference to a historical figure in the show. And so there's like, if you listen to the entire soundtrack, you might have to listen to it like 10, 20 times to pick up on each reference. But it's like, he's like, Admiral Howe has blah, blah, blah troops. And it's like, here's a little brief bio about Admiral Howe and his significance in the Revolution and just in history. Or, Theodosia, whatever happened to her, whatever happened to her mom, these people that are mentioned. And so literally we just kind of had fun with it and, made the best of it. And then both weeks culminated with Q&A sessions with actors from the touring performances. So one of them was Cleveland local, actually two of them were Cleveland locals from the Hamilton cast. And then we had a couple of actors from the Frozen cast just do Q&A sessions via Zoom with our audience members, just to kind of get them feeling like they were back in the theater. And for the most part, I think it went pretty well.
Thank you. I can say, as somebody who in my spare time, I watch like those Watch Mojo YouTube videos of like in Easter eggs on shows and movies. So exactly what you're describing that you did with Hamilton is something that I spend a lot of time watching. So I think that's a really creative way to keep people engaged. But Avid, what about you?
We've touched many things. So do you want to restate the statement, or you want me to?
So you talked about it a little bit, the challenges that you've had to overcome over this past year, or however many months it is now.
Well, several. There were several. One was reimagining teaching, right? Reimagining teaching coupled with the scab of public education being ripped off unapologetically for all to see. So there's a challenge. It was interesting for me because I was still able to connect with my students. So of course we had Zoom, but I had them, I required them to complete assignments through Zoom. So assignments were not just paper, it was, television interviews and commentaries and, things of that nature to just get them comfortable with being on camera. I was very, I don't know if I could say dogmatic, but I was very relentless when it came to their cameras being off. I'm very sensitive to the children I serve. And one is, this is probably going to become the new normal. And so the teacher may allow you to take the camera off, but your job may be on the line. You may have a video interview. You need to be aware of that. We need to be comfortable with that. And so for me as a teacher, I'm now much more, I was already very sensitive, but I'm much more attuned with humanity and less academic, if you will. So I can talk about Bach and Schütz and all of that stuff, but my students enter classrooms with meditation music and they're required to sit in silence for like 3 minutes, just because. I'm again, very, very empathic when it comes to my students, but I think the challenge is trying to reconnect them, trying to, as we all can sit as adults and college students and stuff with, today wasn't a good day, tomorrow will be better. They don't have those tools. They don't have those skill sets. They don't have the ability cerebrally, right? And so, that was a challenge, and the other challenges, and I'm surprised no one said it, was literally separating yourself from it, right? So literally going to have that glass of wine and leaving the job at the job. right? Going to the movies and not thinking about that grant application where you're like, did I fill out line 23 on page 4? Like, honestly, right? Because again, I will not go on and on. So that was a couple of the challenges, to literally separate and find space for self.
Thank you. I think a lot of us can relate to, even even out of a different space. I want to shift gears with the next 2 questions. What advice, or like, what would you recommend for students who are trying to work in a field where they can use their talents in performing arts? How would you recommend for them to get started in terms of like trainings or internships, or even just like clubs or work that they can do to start making sure that their portfolio, so to speak, is starting to set them up for the success that they might want when they're ready to really launch? You can go.
Okay, so I'm really interested in what my colleagues have to say. I would say if there's a student, and obviously there are, who are really serious about the arts, go as far excellent as possible. I think students, unfortunately, today are, I mean, when I came up, it was mid 80s, 90s, what have you. But today, it's almost as if I think students feel that everything on social media is real. And there's something to be said about the first 5 positions of dance. Don't ask me to do that. There's something to be said about training. At the end of the day, and oftentimes we don't think so. So I would say one is get some good foundational practices, a good liberal arts college, or even a conservatory if you can afford it, but strong, because state schools have great programs as well as conservatories. That's one thing. The other thing is, as much as they can, keep a positive outlook. Stay as positive as possible. And when I say positive, I mean, again, my colleagues can chime in. You may go to the same interview or the same audition as a friend. That's okay. That's okay, because everyone needs their bills paid. And it's hello. And I say that because, again, I have colleagues who would say, you know what, David, I can't do this gig. Please call them. They need a tenor. It's something to be said about having that relationship, as we were speaking about, and just always having a positive where people can say, I know who can do this. You know who you thank you for the offer, but I'm not the one for this, but this is that person. And that for me, honestly, most jobs I've gotten has been from recommendation. So those are the 3 top I would totally hold fast to. Tashina Arnold and Tisha Campbell, they played Pam and Gina on Martin. They grew up as like childhood stars from like 10 or 11 years old, literally. So and they don't make any bones about it, but they speak about, this is my friend, I can do a gig, she got the gig. There's something to be said about those relationships.
Jody?
Yes, I completely agree with the relationship aspect of it. And also too, it is absolutely critical to realize that, especially in the performing arts, it is continuing education is your life's work. It is there isn't a day that goes by or a moment that goes by that it isn't important for an artist to understand their place in the world, or try to figure it out, and figure it out through the lens of other people. So being alive in the world is enormously important. You can't live on social media. You definitely can't. I mean, many people do create on social media. I don't mean to say that you can't create there, but it isn't where real life is happening. And I think COVID really did make that clear to me. I grew up without social media and then, you know, adapted to that world. So it's different than people who are coming up now who have lived only in that world. But I think it's enormously important to realize that we as human beings and the things that we're doing as artists is all about that interpersonal connection that you get with a live human being, and that understanding that you get from having a conversation with a live human being. And that the most important part is that you are going to be educated every day of your life as an artist. And it's so important to have like this fundamental level of expertise that you can draw upon so that you can use those relationships and those interactions in a way that benefits you as an artist. The I would definitely say if you want to be an actor, a singer, a dancer, whatever, you have to be the best in your field. I mean, it's or the best that you can be, I should say. You need to be the best because there's so many people that are doing this. So it's like mediocre gets kind of siphoned off very quickly. So it's really important to understand that you're not just going to learn it from some kid on TikTok. You know, these are crafts. These are things that people spend their entire lives doing. So it's important to understand that. And then the biggest workshop that I took that changed my life as a artist was the Commercial Theater Institute's producer workshops. I took them starting as an actor. I had no idea I would ever get in producing. I had no idea that that was even going to be a direction that I would go in. And it was one, the relationships that I got from producers that were working on Broadway, off Broadway, were invaluable, but also to understand that in a way that I hadn't before, the business of artistry. It's not my favorite thing. I would much rather be an artist, but it's fundamental to understanding how you can move forward and do the work that you want to do. So those would be my suggestions. And also if you want a good online community, there is a group called Stage Milk. They're out of Australia, and they are such a great community. You're constantly putting monologues or scenes on tape and getting feedback and doing the work. Like, it's so important to realize that you have to do the work every day. Like, if you're a singer, you're singing every day. If you're a dancer, you're dancing every day. If you're an actor, you're acting every day. Like, this is what you love and this is what you do. So
I'm going to jump in. First things first, bouncing off of what Avid said about, like, you know, pursue excellence, and Jody touched on this too. It's like, if you decide that you want to go in that direction, absolutely try to go for like the best that you can. Like, I never thought I was going to go and get into Juilliard. All right, I just don't have the stuff, but I still auditioned for it because I need the experience. And Carnegie Mellon and Boston Conservatory. And I ended up going to North Carolina School of the Arts, which was the perfect place for me. The universe took really good care of me. But yeah, like, if you're going to go this route, don't half-ass it, because you're already making a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. Once you're there, hopefully, or whatever circumstance you're in a training environment, one of the best pieces of advice we all got as students at the conservatory was the class that you like least is the one that you need most. And I think that applies to all of life. Like my taxes, I hate doing my taxes, but guess what? I really, because I'm not good at doing them and saving my receipts, that's kind of what I need to focus on a lot. All right, so the things that come naturally to you, good for you. Yay, gold star. but the things that are life skills that you just need as part of your tool belt and you don't like, that's a red flag. That's an indication. Switching gears a little bit, we in our fourth year, our senior year, we had a Q&A like this, but it was in person because yay, no COVID at the time. And it was a wonderful casting director. There's that complicated phrase I was looking for. Wonderful casting director that had gone to school as an actor, became a director, and then decided, you know what, I'm actually much better at being a casting director in New York City. So she comes back every year and is very gracious and does this talk. Personally, I hated her. I really, I respected her because she's really good at what she does, but personally, I'm like, not my people, but you're a very valuable source of information. She said one thing that I will never forget. And she was saying, look, when you go to New York, you go to LA, you got to be like, I want to be at the big table, playing with the big guys, and I want to do it, and this is how you do it. And if you don't want to be at the big table, I mean, whatever, man, like you make your own table. In that moment, I realized her whole objective was like, this is how you play at the big table. And that was, stupidly enough, the first time that I realized in my training, oh my God, I can make my own table. That sounds so much more fun than playing by this or that rule book to be part of the big table, right? That was just my personal choice. But what I invite everyone to do who's going into this career is kind of feel out, what direction do I want to go in? Do I want to go in both? That's I mean, Jody does it all, right? She's a writer, producer, actor, director. That's, you do it all. That's amazing. I'm not nearly as good at multitasking my talents like that. I was like, no, I have my own story to tell. I don't like people like the person that was talking to us at that moment. I was like, I don't want to fill my life with people like you, so I need to make some choices. Or if you do want to go in that direction full on 100% and not make your own work, that's another. It's important to make that choice in an informed way, so you know what gears to use when, right? And then if you are like going in the direction of, I want to make stuff, my strongest advice in that direction is do your research. Oh my God, if you have a story to tell, great. Nobody's gonna care unless you do your research painstakingly. Jody says she's been working on this for 7 to 8 years. There are one-hit wonders in that sense. When it comes to writing your own stuff, you have to earn your seat, not at the big table, but like just in the world. So do your research, and it whichever way you go, it is a painstaking process. But having said that, my last point, and then I promise to shut up, is it's all about having fun. At the end, if you're not having fun, you're absolutely doing something wrong. Even when you're doing the things, like I said earlier, that you really don't like that class, that's the one you got to double down on. What I mean by double down on it is double down on how to have fun there. Because if you're not having fun, nobody wants to be in the room with you. Oh my God, I have one life to live. Just stop sucking the energy out of the room, right? So same with auditions. If you decide I want to be big table, I want to pound the pavement, which I was admittedly awful at. I hated that because I wanted to do my own thing. But if you're doing that, every opportunity to audition, it's not precious. Throw it out the window. Just have fun. It's a privilege to be in the room. And those people on the other side of the table are not there to judge you. They're not there to give you, 2 out of 10, screw you, like they're there because they want you to be the solution. They want you to be the answer to their search. They want you to succeed as much as you want to succeed. They're not there to judge you. And I had it in my mind for way too long that if I'm walking in there, like I'm clammy and, oh, what do they think of me? Who cares what they think of you? All they want to see is you having done your research and having fun, taking that opportunity to play. All of life is a party. And man, if you're not accepting the invitation to it, it's a waste. Join the party. People to be in the same room as people who are enjoying what they do. If you're not enjoying it, keep searching for something that lights that up in you.
Thank you. Joe, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, I'm coming from a little different perspective as
Right.
opposed to trying to, be a performer or just kind of be within like an organization, a performing arts organization. I would say what's worked for me is just really hone your whatever the transferable skills are to what you're trying to get to, and that's probably advice that a career center would give to anybody searching for any position at any time. I started out when I was getting my master's in sport management. I started out as an intern with the Mets. I was doing facilities at Citi Field, and so when you go into that initial interview at Playhouse Square for ticket sales, it's not as relevant. But eventually, you still have that in your back pocket, so that when you are trying to kind of get a more desirable position, or not necessarily more desirable, but just something that is more suited to what you're looking to do, that you have, this requires event experience. Well, I do have this internship experience with, these events that host, 30,000 people a night. So it's just something to not be like, oh, they don't care about that. That's, a baseball team that has nothing to do with this. Like, that's just not true at all. Those examples go on and on. I could probably list 20 of them, but I won't. But that's just kind of basically, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's front of house, programming, production teams, like the same is suitable for everything. If you can't get, one niche internship in that field, like don't give up on that. That doesn't mean you can't get into that field further down the road. I mean, it's great if you can start there and just keep going up, but that's definitely not the only path to success.
Thank you. All right, so I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. I think something that I learned, I didn't know a lot about performing arts industry before this, but I think it's so interesting that a lot of the advice that you share is so similar and transfers to the advice that we give students, regardless of the field that they're going into. So I want to thank you for your time today. We did actually have a classroom of students that had joined and they were watching and they had to leave a little earlier, but they messaged me and they said that the guests have been wonderful. So definitely appreciated. And then I will be sharing this with the students that had registered as well. But if does anyone have any last words that they want to share before we close out for the day?
I'd love to, actually, because you just touched on it. Everything that we were saying transfers over to so many other industries. I remember my mom, who's an artist herself, very supportive of everything I've ever done, bless her heart. When I was at the conservatory, we had academic classes. They were not a joke in and of themselves, but that's not why we were all there. They happen in the mornings, and then by 10 a.m. you're done. You do your arts thing until 1 o'clock in the morning. You do your math class, your rehearsals, whatever. So that's 89% of my day was the art stuff. You had to do the academics to get your BFA. And over the phone, she's calling in from Germany, and I talk to her once a month. I'm terrible at keeping up with her. She says I'll never forget this, and she regrets it forever. And this is my first year. She's like, well, when are you I'm hearing about these academics, when are you gonna take more of those real classes? I'm like, what do you mean real classes? I'm here for a theater. We all agreed that this was the way. What do you mean? So I've never let go of that. I was like, what is that? Why do we, even a mother as supportive and as artistically influenced as she is, has a hard time delineating between oh, well, this is real and this is playtime, right? After I graduated, a couple of years went by, and there's a certain amount of trauma involved in any kind of conservatory training where you hold a lot against the program. And as I kind of processed that and worked through it on my own, I realized, man, I got to write a thank you letter to all my teachers, because what I realized after a couple of years of living in New York was I felt more prepared for everything New York had to throw at me. Now, I didn't move to New York on September 1st, 2001. So you got me a one up on that, Jody. But like I felt more prepared for all the crazy stuff, the day-to-day, minute-by-minute things that New York had to throw at me than any of my high school friends who had gone to college for, very practical things and degrees. I was functioning at a higher rate and at a faster pace than they were, and I had to reflect on that. Why? Because conservatory training, and I can only speak about conservatory training, so it's very limited sphere, very limited angle. Conservatory training, the way I had it, trains humans, not just this one little skill set. It's humans. Whereas if you go to accounting, you learn very much about a lot of numbers and spreadsheets. Great, awesome, and then you're so good at that. But I felt like a lot of different situations, that has bled into my life here at City Center Dance as the executive director. Like every single day, I'm touching on lessons that I learned in my training. So when you're out like, oh, what's practical? I need a law degree so that I could do this or this or this or this. I can't thank my teachers enough for this well-rounded human training, which most liberal arts programs don't have the time to touch on. They do a lot, but I felt so blessed that I got to have well-rounded, like, oh, this is how I am a decent, kind human. And oh my God, does that ever get far in life? And it doesn't really there's no human 101 class. I'm sorry. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you. Okay, so thank you all